Hey buddy, if you are new to the channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Now let's begin the story. I was 23 when it happened, old enough to know better, but still young enough to believe the world was mostly good. Looking back, that belief was my first mistake. I grew up in Ashford, a small working-class town in central Pennsylvania that most people only knew as a blur off the interstate. If you blinked while driving through, you'd miss it. Just a few aging brick buildings, a diner that hadn't changed its menu since the 70s, and a mill that shut down the year I graduated high school. My mom worked nights at a nursing home, my dad drove trucks cross-state, and my older sister Carla had already left for community college in Pittsburgh. That left me at home, drifting. I picked up shifts at a hardware store and sometimes helped out at my uncle's auto shop, but nothing stuck. What I really wanted was to leave. Ashford felt like a waiting room no one ever got called out of. The summer it happened was brutal. Humid, sticky days where even the cicadas sounded tired. I'd started bumming rides from my sister's ex, Eddie, who had an old Ford Ranger. Eddie worked roofing jobs in towns nearby, and I'd tag along sometimes just to get out of Ashford. We weren't close. He was 4 years older and one of those guys who always had grease under his fingernails. But he wasn't a bad person, just restless, like me. That Tuesday mid-August, we were driving back from a job in Denton, a town about 20 miles out. Eddie's truck was running low, so we pulled into a gas station at Miller's Bend, right on the edge of nowhere. It wasn't the kind of place you chose unless you had to. 2 cracked pumps, a flickering canopy light, and a store that smelled like old coffee and bleach. My mom used to warn me about Miller's Bend. "That's where people mind their business too hard," she'd say. Eddie parked and killed the engine. "Gonna grab a drink," he muttered, pushing the door open. "You want anything?" I shook my head. "I'll just hang here." He nodded and headed inside, letting the heavy glass door slam shut behind him. I stayed by the truck, lighting a cigarette, the kind of bad habit that felt less like rebellion and more like survival in Ashford. The air pressed down hot and still. Only one other car sat in the lot, a faded brown Buick with its hood up. The man standing beside it looked ordinary at first, mid-40s, wiry, wearing jeans and a dark ball cap. But as soon as he spotted me, something in my gut went tight. He wasn't smiling, wasn't scowling either, just watching. After a moment, he walked over. "Hey," he said, voice even, almost polite. He stopped a few feet away. "You think you could help me real quick?" I flicked ash off my cigarette. "Depends. With what?" He pointed back at the Buick. "Car won't start right. I just need someone to sit in the driver's seat and press the gas while I check under the hood. Won't take a minute." I felt my stomach dip. On paper, it sounded harmless. But standing there with Eddie gone inside and this stranger waiting, it didn't feel harmless at all. "I don't think so," I said carefully. "Not great with cars." He lifted his hands like, "No problem." "Fair enough. Just figured I'd ask." But he didn't walk away. He just stood there, like he was giving me another chance to change my mind. Behind me, I tugged on the passenger door of the Ranger, forgetting Eddie had locked it. The handle rattled uselessly. A little panic surged up my throat. That's when another figure emerged, from the side of the station. Bigger, heavier, wearing a gray t-shirt stained with sweat. He strolled over casually like he belonged. "You need a hand?" the bigger man asked. The first one gestured toward me. "I was asking her, but she's not comfortable. You mind?" "Sure." The big man shrugged and slid right into the Buick's driver's seat. He pressed the gas, the engine coughing to life like nothing was wrong. "There you go," he said after a few revs. "Feels fine." The wiry man gave a low chuckle. "Guess it fixed itself." They shared a look, quiet, wordless. Then the big man stepped out and walked toward the back of the building, vanishing around the corner. The wiry one lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking back to me. "Thanks anyway," he said softly. Then he got into the Buick, shut the door, and sat there with the engine idling. By the time Eddie came back out, carrying a Mountain Dew and a pack of gum, the Buick was rolling off the lot. "What's up?" he asked when he saw my face. I swallowed hard. "That guy, he asked me to sit in his car, said he needed me to press the gas. Another guy came. They were just weird. Off." Eddie's jaw tightened. He glanced at the road, then back at me. You didn't get in, right? No. Good, he muttered. That's a setup. I've heard about that shit. Once your door closes, you're gone. Nobody stops it. I wanted to believe he was exaggerating, but deep down I knew he wasn't. The Buick hadn't been broken. The men hadn't needed help. They'd been testing, watching, waiting for the right person to say yes. We didn't call the cops. What would we even say? A man asked me to push his gas pedal? No crime in that, just a bad feeling in my gut. But that bad feeling stuck. For weeks after, I couldn't shake it. Every slow-rolling car made my chest seize. Every time I stopped at a gas station, I kept my keys clenched between my fingers like a weapon. I started carrying pepper spray, an alarm on my keychain. What haunted me most wasn't just how close it had come. It was the realization that those men hadn't been nervous. They hadn't cared who saw. They knew most people look away, that nobody wants to get involved. They knew hesitation kills quicker than violence. I still think about it, years later, about how easy it was for them to try in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, like they'd done it before, like they'd done it successfully. Story 2. I was born in a town called Maple Hollow, a patch of nowhere in northern Kansas where the land is flat enough that you can see your dog run away for 2 days. Folks don't pass through Maple Hollow by accident. You either belong there or you're lost. I belonged there for the first 18 years of my life, and in that time, 2 things happened that people still whisper about. The first was when the grain elevator burned down back in '98, a blaze so big you could see it from the interstate. For months, the whole town smelled like smoke and wet wheat. People still say that was the most excitement Maple Hollow ever had. The second thing, that's what this story's about. And unlike the elevator fire, this one never made the papers. Maple Hollow doesn't put its worst truths on display. The kind of terror we brushed against doesn't come from shadows or monsters in the cornfields. It comes from the boy sitting 2 rows behind you in math class, the one you thought you knew. I should tell you about Maple Hollow before I tell you about him. Sundays were sacred. Church in the morning, roast beef or fried chicken in the afternoon, and then silence. By evening, the whole town felt like it had been tucked in under a heavy quilt. Only the diner on Main stayed open, serving pie and coffee to the same half-dozen regulars. Summers were long, winters were bitter, and fall, the fall of 2002 when I was a freshman, was just warm enough that you could ride your bike after dinner without a jacket. I had 3 close friends back then: Eli Turner, lanky and restless; Marcus Reeves, quiet but tough as a hickory tree; and Hannah Price, who was smarter than all of us combined. We'd ride around on our bikes, circle the grain silos, cut through the football field, and end up by Willow Creek, a skinny trickle of water that gave our town its only natural charm. That's where we were headed the night everything started. We were halfway down Oak Ridge Drive when a kid named Ryan Bell came tearing toward us on his bike, like the devil himself was on his tail. "Garage fire!" he yelled. "The Miller place! It's on fire!" Eli didn't even ask which Miller place. He just slammed his pedals and shot off, and the rest of us followed. Tires screeched around the corners, Hannah's braid whipping behind her, Marcus pumping hard without saying a word. When we reached Willow Creek Road, we didn't need Ryan anymore. The smoke was already rising above the rooftops. By the time we skidded into the Miller's cul-de-sac, half the town had gathered. The garage was a furnace. Flames licked skyward, the siding peeling and curling like paper. Firefighters shouted over the roar, hoses arcing water that turned to steam before it hit the building. Sheriff's deputies were pushing people back. Then came the pops. Bang! Population bang. It wasn't just wood cracking, it was sharper than that. Firefighters dropped their hoses and sprinted back. One of them nearly bowled me over as he shouted, "Everybody back! Now!" I'd never seen grown men in uniform run like that. My stomach knotted. We didn't stick around. We bolted on our bikes, hearts hammering, smoke stinging our throats. I looked back once. The sky glowed an ugly pink, like sunset bleeding from the wrong direction. By Monday morning, the fire was all anyone could talk about. Kids passed rumors in the hallway like candy. Somebody said the Miller's old tractor blew up. Somebody else claimed a meth lab. On Tuesday, we found out the truth, or part of it. We were herded into the gym, the whole student body packed onto the bleachers. Principal Harris looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Even Coach Daniels wasn't chewing his gum. Sheriff Dawson stood at the microphone, hat in hand. "Folks," he began, his voice gravelly, "you've heard about the fire at the Miller place Sunday night. I'm sorry to tell you, we lost one of our own." The gym fell silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "It was Aaron Miller," Dawson said. I felt my chest cave in. Aaron wasn't my best friend, but he was in my Spanish class. He cracked dumb jokes sometimes. He lived 2 blocks from me. Around me, kids gasped. Hannah covered her mouth. Marcus just stared at the floor. Sheriff Dawson continued, "We're still investigating. If any of you noticed Aaron acting unusual, we'd appreciate you reaching out. Not here, not now, but call us." That's when the confusion set in. Why did the sheriff care how Aaron had been acting? He'd died in a fire, hadn't he? Wasn't that the end of it? By Wednesday, whispers turned into wild stories. Some said Aaron had been building fireworks. Others claimed his older brother was mixed up in drugs. Nobody knew for sure. Thursday night, Maple Hollow held one of its town meetings in the rec center. Folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups, whispered prayers. I wasn't invited, of course. Just my parents went. I stayed home playing GoldenEye on the N64, ignoring my homework. When they came back, I knew something was wrong. My dad's face was stone, the way it had been when his cousin died in a farming accident. My mom sat like all the air had been sucked from her lungs. "Sit," my dad said. I thought I was in trouble. "Did I do something?" "No," he said quietly. "This is about Aaron." Then they told me. Aaron hadn't just been tinkering with fireworks. He'd been building a bomb. Not some pipe stuffed with gunpowder. A real bomb. He'd followed instructions from the internet, scribbled in a spiral notebook they'd found half-burned under his workbench. The device had exploded while he was making it, killing him instantly. The garage fire was just the aftermath. But the notebook, that's what froze me. It laid out a plan. Aaron intended to place the bomb under St. Mark's Church on Veterans Day. The whole town would have been packed inside. Over 100 people, neighbors, teachers, friends, my parents, me. He wasn't after anyone in particular. He just wanted to hurt people. My mom was crying as she told me. My dad just stared at the wall and said, "He would have done it." The sheriff's office never shared the full contents of the journal, but word leaked. He'd written about Columbine, said he understood those boys, said he wanted to be remembered. At school, kids suddenly claimed they'd always known something was off about Aaron, that he was too quiet, that he didn't smile enough. I didn't buy it. Aaron wasn't bullied. He wasn't friendless. He was just there. Another face in the hall. The Millers moved away 6 weeks later. Their house was bulldozed by spring. The empty lot became Miller Field, a neat little park with picnic tables. Nobody said the name Miller anymore. We had a school counselor visit every week for 2 months. Nobody talked to her. A few kids made dark jokes until Marcus punched one in the cafeteria for saying, "Guess Aaron got his wish." No charges were filed. It's been 19 years. I live in Denver now. Maple Hollow's still there. Still quiet, still waving from porches, still serving cinnamon rolls the size of your hand at the diner. But every Veterans Day I remember. I remember the garage burning like the gates of hell had opened in the middle of our town. I remember the firefighters running away. I remember the way Sheriff Dawson's voice cracked when he said Aaron's name. And I remember the notebook, the plan, the way my stomach turned when I realized a kid I'd sat beside in Spanish class wanted to blow up our entire world. Sometimes horror isn't what happens. Sometimes it's what almost does. And in Maple Hollow, Kansas, the worst thing that ever happened was the thing that didn't. Story 3, I moved to Pine Hollow because I thought I'd earned peace. For 32 years, I worked as a corrections officer at Redgate State Penitentiary in Kansas. A life measured in steel doors, lockdown counts, and echoing keys. I saw more stabbings than birthday parties, more hangings than weddings, and spent more nights staring at concrete than at the stars. When I retired, I told myself I'd never hear another alarm blare at 5 a.m. I cashed in my pension, packed what was left of my life into a U-Haul, and started looking for some quiet corner of the Midwest where nobody knew my name. That's how I found Pine Hollow, Missouri. It wasn't on any map you'd think to check. A town of maybe 1,200 people, tucked between two stretches of farmland and a patch of second-growth woods. One main road, a gas station with a diner attached, a grocery store half the size of a Walmart's parking lot, and houses that looked like they'd been built when Eisenhower was still president. I bought a ranch-style house at the very edge of town, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, faded blue siding, and a porch that creaked but held. The realtor said it had belonged to an old widow who passed 2 winters ago. Nobody had touched it since. It needed paint and a little elbow grease, but it was cheap, and most importantly, it was quiet. For the first few weeks, life was exactly what I wanted. Mornings with black coffee on the porch, the sound of cicadas instead of clanging doors. Evenings where I walked the cracked sidewalks, waved politely to strangers, and pretended for a while that I could actually belong in a town where nobody knew the things I'd seen. I wasn't good at small talk. Years in corrections train you to keep walls up, to size people fast and reveal nothing back. Still, people in Pine Hollow had that Midwestern politeness. You don't invite strangers in, but you wave, you nod, you offer a, "How you doing?" that doesn't need an answer. For the first time in decades, I thought, maybe I can breathe here. That lasted until the night a man named Harold Baines knocked on my door. It was a Thursday evening, just past sundown. I'd been unpacking boxes in the garage when I heard the knock. 3 short raps, like the rhythm of someone who knew they'd be answered. I opened the door to a man in his 50s, maybe early 60s. Broad shoulders gone soft with age, flannel tucked neatly into jeans, clipboard in hand. His smile was quick, practiced. "Evening," he said. "Name's Harold. I live up the road. Thought I'd welcome you to Pine Hollow." I wiped my palms on my jeans. "Appreciate it. Just moved in a couple weeks back." "Yep, saw the truck." He nodded at the clipboard. "I'm with the Pine Hollow Watch. Nothing official, just neighbors keeping an eye out for each other. Make sure things stay quiet. We rotate shifts, drive around, check for anything out of place." I frowned. "You guys get much trouble around here?" Harold shrugged lightly. "Couple of times we've had folks from out of town snooping around empty houses, kids cutting through fields. Nothing big, but better safe than sorry. You'd be surprised how fast things can get messy if you don't keep eyes out." His smile held, but his eyes didn't. They studied me, like he was waiting to see which way I'd lean. "You looking for volunteers?" I asked slowly. "Always." He brightened. "Nothing too demanding. Midnight to 3, once a week. We give you a vest, a map, show you your route. No need to get out of the car. Just drive, watch, report. Presence is half the battle." I hesitated. I'd left one life of vigilance behind. I wasn't sure I wanted another, but something in me still ran on the habit of duty. I didn't have family to look after. I had time. And sitting alone in a house every night wasn't peace. It was just empty. "All right," I said. "Sign me up." Harold's smile widened. "Knew I liked you." "Welcome aboard, Mr. Callahan." I froze a second. I hadn't told him my name. That Saturday was my first patrol. I filled a thermos with coffee, printed a playlist of old Springsteen songs, and followed the loop Harold had drawn on my map. 5 streets in the northeast end, mostly lined with tidy ranches and a few sagging 2-stories that had seen better days. It was quiet, almost too quiet. A few porch lights glowed like candles. I saw one man in slippers collect his trash bin early. A woman walking her Labrador waved faintly. I drove slow, headlights dimmed, coffee hot in the cup holder. For a while, it felt almost therapeutic, like keeping watch over a place I wanted to believe was good. Weeks passed the same. I learned the other names: Linda Croft, who kept attendance like a school teacher at meetings in the community hall; Tom Reiner, a tall, stiff man who never spoke more than a grunt; and a handful of others, all with polite smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Harold always repeated the same rule. "We're the eyes and ears, not the hands. Stay in the car. Don't intervene. Report, don't engage." I told myself it was harmless, maybe even noble. Until October. Until the night I saw what I wasn't supposed to. It was cold enough that frost fogged the corners of my windshield. The clock read 2:11 a.m. I was driving down Briarwood Lane, a stretch of road where the houses thinned and the trees thickened. Some places sat abandoned, yards gone wild, shutters hanging crooked. That's when I spotted them. Two men near a sagging white bungalow, one crouched at the side door with a crowbar, the other scanning the street. The door gave with a crack, and they slipped inside with no rush, no mass, like they belonged. My stomach tightened. I pulled over, killed my lights, and reached for my phone. Before I could unlock it, headlights flared in my rear view. A black pickup, no sound until it was there, blocking me in. The driver's door opened, then the passengers, three men stepped out. One holding a flashlight, another with something heavy in his grip. They didn't hurry, they just walked toward me, calm as if this was routine. The tallest one tapped my window with two fingers. I didn't roll it down. I didn't breathe. I threw the car in drive and bolted forward, clipping the curb as I tore down Briarwood. A crack hit the back glass, spiderwebbing it. My hands shook, but I didn't stop until I hit Main Street, where the diner's neon sign buzzed like salvation. No one followed. But in the rear view, just before I turned, I saw the man watching under the street lamp. It was Harold. The next morning, I called the county sheriff's office. A young deputy showed up just before noon, uniform crisp, hair too neat, polite smile plastered on. I told him everything. The break-in, the men, the truck, the cracked window. He scribbled lazily in a notebook. That house has been empty for years. Could have been owners checking in. At 2 in the morning, with a crowbar? My voice rose. He shrugged. Technically not a crime if nothing's reported missing. My jaw tightened. And the truck? The men that followed me? We'll keep an eye out. He closed the notebook like a teacher humoring a student. Appreciate you looking out, Mr. Callahan. Harold runs a good program here. I froze. You know Harold? Of course. Solid guy. Community's lucky to have him. I almost told him. Almost. But the words died in my throat. After that, everything shifted. The watch stopped calling me for shifts. Linda ignored my texts. Tom stared through me at the grocery store like I wasn't there. Harold walked past my porch 3 times that week, whistling some tuneless note. Once he waved. I didn't wave back. The black pickup idled near my street some afternoons, gone by the time I looked twice. Neighbors started acting strange. My next-door neighbor, Pete, began mowing his lawn at 9:30 p.m. Loud, deliberate, staring at me each time he passed the fence line. One morning, I found a dead raccoon stuffed into my mailbox. Another night, I woke at 3 a.m. to the crunch of gravel. Peeking through the blinds, I saw 3 silhouettes at the edge of my driveway. They didn't move closer, didn't speak, just stood, watching. I don't know what the Pine Hollow Watch really is. Drugs, stolen property, something darker. What I do know is this. They aren't protecting Pine Hollow. They're running it. They ride around with vests and flashlights, not to keep crime out, but to decide which empty homes to strip, which newcomers to intimidate, which neighbors to keep quiet. The sheriff's office won't stop them. The town won't either, because the town is them. I haven't left Pine Hollow yet. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's because running would only tell them they've won. And men like Harold don't let go, not even when you cross county lines. So I keep my blinds closed. I keep the porch light dark, and I watch. Because if Pine Hollow has taught me anything, it's this. The people watching aren't keeping you safe. They're keeping you theirs. Story 4. I never thought my life would end up here. Not in Ashford, not in a town most people couldn't even point to on a map. But life doesn't ask your permission before it unravels. I came to Ashford, Illinois 3 years ago. A quiet farming town 2 hours southwest of Chicago, the kind of place where people still leave their front doors unlocked, and the diner's chalkboard menu hasn't changed in 20 years. Population just under 3,000, give or take. The town had 1 gas station, 1 school, 2 churches, and a single funeral home, Ashford Memorial. That's where I ended up working. My name's Eli Mercer. I was 33 when I arrived here. Before this, I lived in Chicago with my fiancée, Marissa. She was everything. Smart, funny, stubborn in a way that drove me crazy, but made me love her even more. We were planning a wedding when the accident happened. A rainy night, her hands on the wheel, my voice telling her to slow down. A truck ran a red light. She didn't make it. I walked away with a concussion, a scar on my collarbone, and the kind of guilt that claws at you in the dark. I couldn't stay in the city. Every street reminded me of her. Every sound of rain against glass pulled me back into that car. So I left, packed what I had left into my old Ford, drove until the skyline disappeared, and kept driving until the silence felt heavy enough to bury me. Ashford was supposed to be my hiding place. A family friend of my mother's knew the owner of the funeral home, Mr. Whitaker, and got me a job as the night attendant. It was simple work, paper logs, cleaning, making sure the cooler temperature stayed steady, and occasionally helping with prep when needed. Whitaker was in his 70s, a pale, stiff kind of man who spoke in short sentences and moved like he'd been embalmed decades ago. But he wasn't unkind. He gave me space, and that was fine by me. The first 6 months were uneventful. Just me, silence, and the dead. It was October when everything changed. I remember because the cornfields around town had just been harvested, leaving the land flat and empty, like ribs picked clean. That night I started my shift like usual, signed the logbook, checked the lights, unlocked the cooler. Routine. Only when the heavy steel door swung open, I froze. Inside on the middle shelf lay me. At first I thought I was losing it. The face staring back was mine, every detail exact. The faint scar above my right eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 13. The crooked front tooth, the same tired eyes. It was like looking into a mirror where the reflection didn't breathe. It wore the standard white mortuary sheet. A blank toe tag dangled from its foot. I checked the intake log. Nothing. The last registered body had come in 2 days earlier, an old farmer named Klein. No new deliveries, no phone calls, nothing. My stomach twisted. I backed away so quickly I hit the prep counter, sending a tray of scalpels clattering across the tile. I wanted to call Whitaker, but what would I even say? "Hey, sir, there's a dead version of me in the cooler. Could you come take a look?" So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I processed the body. Hands trembling, I shaved it, washed it, placed it into the retort, watched as the flame consumed it. The smell clung to my clothes, to my skin. When the time came to sweep the ashes into the tray, I dumped them straight into the waste bin instead of sealing them in the usual urn. I couldn't bear the thought of me sitting on a shelf. I didn't sleep that morning. I stared at my ceiling and told myself it had to be a hallucination. Stress, fatigue, a dream I hadn't realized I was dreaming, but the image was sharp, too sharp. And the next night, when I opened the cooler, he was there again. It didn't stop. At first it was once every few nights. Then it became nightly. Each time I opened the cooler, there he was. My face, my body, blank toe tag, silent. And each time I cremated him. I started keeping a journal, writing down what I saw, what changed. Some nights the corpse looked younger, hair cut the way I wore it in college. Once it had a black eye I hadn't seen since I was 19. Another night, its lips were twisted in the faintest smile. One night I swear it blinked. I tested it, left it on the prep table overnight. When I came back the next shift, it was gone. Back in the cooler, pristine. Another time, I made a tiny cut behind its ear with a scalpel. Just a slit, small enough that only I'd know it was there. The next morning when I looked in the mirror, that same cut was on me. Fresh. That was the first time I called out sick. Spent the night curled up in bed with the lights on. I dreamt of someone knocking on my door. When I woke, muddy footprints trailed across my porch. A year passed like that. A year of cremating myself. A year of silent terror. I stopped dating. Stopped making friends in town. Stopped being me. I existed only from shift to shift, eating instant noodles and staring at the shadows on my ceiling. Then one night, I couldn't do it. I stared at the body, my body, and broke down, slid against the cold tile floor and cried harder than I had since Marissa's funeral. Then I left it there, closed the cooler and walked away. The next night, it was gone. For the first time in months, the cooler was empty. I laughed. I actually laughed, right there in the mortuary, the sound echoing off tile. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. It changed. One morning, brushing my teeth, I noticed a bruise on my jaw, then the scar behind my ear, only fresher this time, red and irritated. The next shift, I opened the cooler. He was there again, only not dead. His eyes were open, breathing shallow, chest barely rising. I slammed the door shut and ran outside, vomiting by the dumpster. I didn't go back in until daylight. 2 weeks later, he came to my door. It was raining. I peered through the peephole and saw myself standing on the porch, wearing my clothes, my hoodie with the bleach stain, my jeans with the torn pocket. He didn't knock again, just stood there, staring. I called 911. When I looked back, he was gone. Police found nothing. No footprints. Nothing on the doorbell cam except static. That was the night I told Whitaker everything. He listened silently, then walked to the back of the embalming room. Unlocked a drawer I'd never seen him open before. Inside was a folder, yellowed with age. Photos, notes, old logs. "You're not the first," he said. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. It happened to my father and his father. Every generation, it chooses one of us. "What is it?" I whispered. He shook his head. "No name, no origin. Just a pattern. First dead, then alive. Then it tries to take your place. How do I stop it?" His eyes met mine. "Don't feed it," so I stopped. No more cremations, no more recognition. When I saw him, I ignored him, walked past like he wasn't there. And slowly he faded. The bruises healed. The scar lightened. I felt human again. Until last week, Whitaker was found slumped over his desk. Heart failure, they said. And last night, when I arrived for my shift, the cooler was already open. Inside weren't one, but three. Three versions of me, each staring with different expressions. One sad, one angry, one smiling. I locked the door, disabled the phone. I'm writing this by hand now, surrounded by the smell of embalming fluid and the hum of the cooler. I know what it wants. I know it doesn't end. Because tonight, when I leaned close, the smiling one whispered, and the voice was mine. "If someone finds this, don't stay in Ashford. Don't take the night job. Don't think you can outlast it. This town doesn't let you leave. You don't get second chances here. You just get replaced. And I don't think I'm the original anymore. The cooler is calling." Story 5. I was 15 the spring it happened, and I swear to you, nothing ever really happened in our town. That isn't me exaggerating. It was just the truth of life in Ashford, Kansas. Population, 1,026 the last time I saw it painted on the weather-beaten welcome sign that leaned crooked on the side of Route 11. It was the sort of place where everyone knew your grandparents, and every argument or scandal eventually found its way into the church bulletin, disguised as a prayer request. We had one gas station, two diners that served the same food but hated each other's guts, a high school that hadn't been renovated since the 70s, and a hardware store that doubled as the town's unofficial gossip hub. If you wanted entertainment, you either drove 40 miles north to Wichita or made your own out of whatever you had. Cable came late, internet later, but it didn't matter. Most of us grew up outside, hiking the woods, fishing in the creeks, tossing footballs in the empty lots where houses were supposed to get built but never did. I was an only child. My dad worked maintenance at the grain mill, and my mom picked up shifts at the diner when she could. We weren't poor exactly, but things were always tight. The kind of tight where birthday gifts were bought secondhand and vacations didn't exist. But I had two good friends, my whole world back then. There was Eli Jensen, tall and wiry with a mop of blonde hair that never laid flat no matter how much gel he used. We'd known each other since before kindergarten. Our moms worked the same church bake sales, and we ended up in every little league team together. Eli wasn't the bravest kid, but he made up for it with quick jokes that could break tension in any room. Then there was Hannah Pierce, who moved to Ashford the summer before 8th grade. She was sharp, funny in a way that sometimes cut, and carried herself like she didn't need anyone, which made most kids steer clear. But she clicked with Eli and me almost instantly. Maybe because she was as restless as we were. Maybe because she didn't think our backwater town was the center of the universe. Hannah always had that edge. Combat boots, band tees from bands nobody else had heard of, a constant air of being half bored and half amused. The three of us lived on the same stretch of Birchwood Drive, a cracked two-lane road on the edge of town, where the streetlights flickered out half the time. Every weekend, if we weren't at Eli's throwing a football around or sneaking warm sodas from his garage fridge, we were out wandering, across the creek beds, into the woods, or across the endless fields that rolled flat as a tabletop around Ashford. That spring of 2001 was warmer than usual. The mornings were still crisp, the evenings chilly, but midday had that faint heat you could feel through your hoodie. I remember the date exactly, April 14th, a Saturday. My dad had already left early to fix a belt on one of the conveyor systems at the mill, and my mom was on the phone with my aunt, gossiping loud enough that I could hear every word from my room. I was sitting at my desk flipping a quarter over and over when I heard Eli's whistle outside. "Come on," he yelled from the porch. He was wearing his brother's old Letterman jacket, sleeves too short for him. "Where?" I called back through the screen. "Does it matter?" I grabbed my backpack, already stuffed with a pocket knife, a half-empty water bottle, and a beat-up football, and slipped out. We cut down the road to Hannah's house. She was sitting on her porch railing, arms crossed, combat boots resting on the chipped paint. Without a word, she hopped down and joined us. That was the thing about us. We never really planned. We just went. We followed the dirt trail that snaked behind Eli's house, past the line of cottonwoods that marked the edge of town. The ground was still soft from rain earlier in the week, but the sky was wide and cloudless. After about an hour of weaving through woods and open stretches, we came out into a broad expanse of grassland. Tall golden grass swayed in the breeze. Usually we stuck to the same paths, but that morning, Eli squinted at something in the distance. A darker patch of grass near a small stand of twisted elm trees. "You see that?" he said, pointing. "Probably nothing," I muttered. "Only one way to find out," Hannah said, already heading toward it. We pushed through the grass, the stalks scratching against our jackets, until we reached the clearing. It was bigger than it looked, flat enough to throw the football around. We dropped our bags and started messing around, shouting, laughing, sprinting across the open ground. Hannah threw the cleanest spiral of any of us. Then Eli hurled the ball too high, too far. It sailed over my head and disappeared into the tall grass. "Nice throw, Peyton Manning," I groaned, jogging after it. I parted the grass, scanning for the ball, when something else caught my eye. A flash of faded red metal, half hidden beneath weeds. At first I thought it was a tractor, but the shape was wrong. I stepped closer. It was a car. An old station wagon, maroon paint dulled by years of sun, fake wood paneling peeling along the sides. Vines curled around the mirrors. The windshield was cracked like a spiderweb. "Hey," I shouted. "Come look!" Eli and Hannah pushed through the grass and froze. "No way," Eli whispered. "How the hell? There's no road out here." Hannah circled the car slowly. It didn't just drive here. Somebody left it. My hand shook a little as I tried the passenger door. At first it stuck, but then it gave with a groan, spilling dust into the air. Inside, the car was intact. Faded seats, cracked dashboard, a pair of fuzzy dice still swinging from the mirror. "This is creepy as hell," Eli said, but he climbed in anyway. Hannah slid behind the wheel. I sat shotgun. For an hour we stayed there, making up stories about how it got there. Eli swore it was part of a bank heist. Hannah said it was probably some teenager's love nest. We laughed, tossed jokes, ignored the gnawing strangeness of it all. Before we left, Hannah said, "Let's keep this spot ours." No one else. We all agreed. The next morning it rained, a steady drizzle that turned heavy by noon. Eli still showed up at my door, dripping water down his sleeves. "You in?" he asked. "Hell yeah." Hannah met us at the trailhead, soaked through her hoodie. "Still want to?" she asked. "We're halfway already," Eli said. We sprinted through the woods, slipping in the mud, laughing breathlessly until we collapsed inside the car, rain hammering the roof. I slid into the back seat this time. Hannah and Eli sat up front, joking about how we should hotwire it, take it joyriding through town. That's when my sneaker brushed something under the seat. Something soft. I bent down, moved aside an old fast food wrapper, and froze. It was hair, brown, fine strands clumped together. Too human to mistake. I swallowed hard and ran my hand along the underside of the seat. That's when I felt it. A clean slit in the upholstery, crudely stitched closed. "Eli," I whispered, tapping his shoulder. "We need to go. Now." He laughed nervously. "What? Why?" "Just come on." I climbed out. Hannah followed, confused, rain plastering her hair to her face. "There's hair under the seat," I said once we were far enough away, "and the fabric's cut open, like someone stuffed something in there." Hannah's face went pale. Eli's grin vanished. "You serious?" he asked. "Yeah." We walked back in silence, mud sucking at our shoes. That evening, I told my dad. I didn't mention that we'd been there the day before. I just said we stumbled on the car and something felt wrong. He frowned but nodded. "I'll call Sheriff Nolan, let him check it." By late afternoon, Sheriff Nolan was at our door, asking for directions. I told him as best I could. He thanked me and left. That night, while Eli and I were playing cards in his basement with Hannah, his mom came downstairs. "The sheriff's here," she said. We went up. Sheriff Nolan stood in the doorway, soaked boots, grim face. "They found something," he said. "Not just the car, a body, what's left of one." My stomach dropped. Hannah sat down immediately. Eli went pale. "We'll need you three to come in tomorrow. Give full statements." We nodded. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. For weeks, Ashford buzzed with rumors. Parents stopped letting their kids out after dark. People avoided the woods. Everyone wanted answers. Eventually, word spread. The car had been registered to a man from Oklahoma, missing since 1997. Dental records confirmed the remains were his. He'd been murdered. Blunt force trauma. His wallet had been buried under the driver's seat. No DNA, no weapon. Just a body left to rot in the grass. The case never got solved. Hannah moved away the next year. Her dad got a job in Missouri. Eli stayed. He runs the hardware store now. We get coffee sometimes, and without fail, the topic comes back. That car, that body. "We got lucky," Eli said once. "We shouldn't have gone back the second day." He's right. I still think about it. How close the killer might have been. How they might have walked among us, nodded at us in the diner. How they got away with it. And how that car sat there, hidden in the field, waiting for someone to find it. Story 6. I was 16, the summer we moved to Ashford Ridge, a little town tucked away in the Blue Ridge foothills of Virginia. If you pulled it up on a map, you'd probably skim right past it, thinking it was just another patch of green, surrounded by two-lane roads and farmland. Population maybe 1,000, give or take, depending on whether folks were honest about counting the trailer park off County Road 6. My mom said we moved for a fresh start. That was her phrase. Like the last 3 years could be neatly folded up and put away in a drawer just by moving zip codes. Truth was, my dad left the year before for a woman he met online, and everything in our old town felt like it had a shadow over it after that. Mom couldn't stand the sideways glances at the grocery store or the pitying smiles from church folks, so when her cousin offered us a place to stay in Ashford Ridge, she took it. To me, it didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt like disappearing. Ashford Ridge didn't even have its own high school. Every morning, I got up before sunrise and rode a 40-minute bus to Meadowbrook High, the next town over. The ride was bumpy and awkward, the kind of ride where kids had sat in the same seat since elementary school, and you were trespassing if you tried to sit anywhere near the front. Nobody sat next to me unless they had no other choice. But eventually, somehow, I found two people who made it bearable: Eli Carter and his sister June. They weren't twins. Eli was adopted when they were both little, but they were in the same grade. June was sharp and quick-witted, with a kind of sarcasm that made her seem older than she was. Eli was quieter, more watchful, with this way of tilting his head at you like he was studying your thoughts. They lived near the edge of Meadowbrook, but their grandparents owned land in Ashford Ridge, so they were around more often than not. The first time I met them, June was skipping rocks at the shallow bend of Ashwood Creek, just down from the old volunteer fire station. Eli was climbing the half-rusted water tower behind it, way too high for anyone's comfort. I was walking past alone, not expecting to talk to anyone, when June called out, "You look like you could use a turn." At first I didn't know what she meant, but then she tossed me a flat rock across the water. I tried, botched it, and it plopped with one sad splash. She laughed, not mean, just easy, and somehow, from that day on, we started hanging out. We became the kind of trio people barely noticed. The quiet kids in the back of the bus, earbuds shared between us, inside jokes whispered in hallways. We didn't go to football games or parties. Weekends were ours, wandering trails with no names, or sitting on the ridge behind Eli's grandparents' pasture, watching storms roll in. For a long time that was enough. But there was something about the woods around Ashford Ridge. Dense, close, the kind of silence that pressed in on you. That always made me feel like the place was holding its breath. And then came the September Saturday I still can't forget. It was one of those mornings that smelled like damp leaves and cool pine, the kind where you could almost taste fall in the air. June showed up outside my house first, wearing Eli's old hoodie and cargo pants that swallowed her frame. Eli trailed behind carrying a backpack that looked heavier than it needed to be. "Where are we going this time?" June asked, brushing hair out of her eyes. "Past Ashwood Creek," I said. "I found a side path last week while walking Scout. Cuts down past the ridge. Haven't seen it before." Eli frowned. "That's where the ground dips into the ravine, right? You sure you didn't get turned around?" I patted my phone. "Google Maps, man. We'll be fine. I packed sandwiches too. We'll survive." June smirked. "If we die, I'm haunting you first." We walked maybe half an hour before we reached the trailhead. The main path looked normal. Packed dirt, scattered boot prints, patches of moss. But halfway down, I veered us onto the side path I'd mentioned. It narrowed quick, the trees folding in like a tunnel, their branches knotted overhead. "This looks cozy," Eli muttered. "Don't be such a chicken," June teased, nudging him. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Birdsong thinned out. Even the wind seemed to fade. I know it sounds strange, but it felt like the forest was listening. We followed until the trail dipped into a shallow creek I'd never seen on any local map. Water ran clear over pale rocks, trickling like it was drawing some old boundary. "Let's follow it," June said immediately. "Follow it to what? A raccoon carcass?" Eli muttered, but he followed anyway. We walked almost an hour and the woods kept changing. The silence grew heavier. Even the air felt thick. And then we saw it. Through the trees, just barely visible, a roof, slanted and moss-covered. June froze. "Wait, is that a house?" "No way," I said. "Nobody lives out here." Eli shifted uneasily. "We should turn back." "You can wait here if you want," June said. "I just want to look." "I'm not standing here alone," Eli muttered. So we went together. The house had no path leading to it. It just sat there like the forest had grown up around it, forgotten by everyone else. The siding peeled in strips. Most of the windows were shattered or eaten up by mildew. The front door sagged, open just enough to look like an invitation. Something in my stomach turned. "You feel that?" I whispered. June nodded. "Yeah, heavy." "We should leave," Eli said flatly. But June was already stepping onto the porch. The wood groaned under her sneakers. "Just 5 minutes." I followed. Of course I did. Inside, the smell hit first. Rot, mildew, and something worse. Something that clung to the back of your throat. The walls were stained yellow. Water had warped the ceiling into a sagging cave. Trash was scattered everywhere, but not like from one night, like someone had been living there a long time. "Someone's been here," June whispered, pointing at a stack of empty cans on the floor. We crept past a broken couch into what had once been a kitchen, and that's when it happened. Footsteps, upstairs. All three of us froze. My heart hammered so loud I was sure whoever it was could hear it. June mouthed, "Go!" But before we could move, he appeared. At the top of the staircase stood a man. Gaunt, clothes hanging off his frame like rags. His hair was wild, his eyes sunken but burning. He looked like he'd been carved out of shadow. "Get out!" he bellowed, his voice cracking like it hadn't been used in years. We screamed, bolted. June was ahead of me, Eli behind. I was almost through the door when a hand clamped my arm. Nails dug into my skin, sharp as broken glass. "No!" I shouted, twisting hard. "Isaac!" June cried, grabbing my other arm, yanking. Eli joined in. Together they pulled me free and we tumbled out into the yard. We ran like hell through the trees, branches clawing at our arms, lungs burning. We didn't stop until we'd found the creek again. June's face was pale. Her lip trembled. "He had a knife," she whispered. "I didn't see it," I gasped. "I did." None of us said much on the way back. My mom was furious when I stumbled in, covered in dirt and scratches. But when I told her what we'd seen, her expression changed. She went quiet. That night she called the sheriff. 2 deputies came by the next morning. A week later, one called back. They found the house, but it was empty. Door nailed shut from the outside. Signs someone had been living there. Mattress, food wrappers, filth in the corner. But no man. They said it was probably a drifter. But I remembered his face, the way he gripped me, the rage in his eyes. He didn't feel like a drifter. He felt like he belonged there. Life went on. June went to college. Eli moved to Richmond. I stayed helping Mom after she got sick. We didn't talk about that day often, but years later, after June's grandfather's funeral, we found ourselves together again. "I want to see if it's still there," June said suddenly. Her voice had an edge. "I need to know it was real." We didn't walk this time. I'd found an old survey map that showed a maintenance road cutting near the site. We took my truck. When we got there, our hearts sank. The house was gone. In its place, an overgrown lot surrounded by tall wire fencing. No sign of construction, no foundation, just dirt and weeds. We got out, walked to the fence. Spray painted across one of the posts were 3 words in red. June's face was pale. "He's gone, right?" I nodded, but I didn't believe it. And sometimes, late at night, when I drive past the tree line near Ashwood Creek, I feel it again. That heaviness, that silence, like the forest remembers. And so do I. Story 7. I was 14 the summer everything in my life split in two, before and after. I don't mean that in the melodramatic way teenagers usually do either. I mean it in the way you measure your life by some single event you can't ever put away. Like a scar, it happened in Ashford, Pennsylvania, a town so small you wouldn't find it on most maps unless you looked hard. About 30 miles outside Pittsburgh, tucked along a stretch of forest and 2-lane roads, where the gas station doubled as a diner, and the biggest news of the week was when the church put new shingles on its roof. We weren't poor exactly, but no one in Ashford had much. Dad used to say the whole town was built on broken promises. Factories that shut down in the 70s, mines that dried up before I was born, and families that never managed to leave. I didn't belong there, at least that's how I felt. But when Dad left us, Mom packed up what little we had and moved back into her sister's house in Ashford, said it was a place to start over. Really, it was the only place she could afford. I remember that first year like it was yesterday. Mom worked double shifts at a nursing home on the edge of town. She'd leave at dawn, her hair pinned back, her face drawn tight with exhaustion. I hardly saw her except in passing. Most days I'd roam around town after school, dragging my feet past shuttered storefronts, brick walls scabbed with peeling paint, and the smell of old rain clinging to every corner. There was one spot where kids my age always ended up, a concrete sunken plaza behind the old courthouse. Locals called it the Hollow. No one remembered why. Maybe because it sat lower than the rest of the square, steep stone steps circling down to a dry fountain in the middle. The city had tried to make it nice once, put a pedestal in the center, built benches, but time wore it down. The place always smelled faintly of mildew, even in summer. Still, it was somewhere to sit when you had nowhere else. That's where I was the day it happened. That's where I saw something I'll never scrub out of my memory, no matter how many years I pile on top of it. It was late September, 1997. One of those gray Saturdays where the sky hangs low and heavy, like it's pressing down on you. Mom had finished her morning shift and met me downtown like she sometimes did. We didn't have money for anything special, but she'd buy us a cinnamon roll from a bakery stand near the square, and we'd sit in the hollow sharing it. That day she looked tired. Her nursing shoes squeaked as she lowered herself onto the stone step, rubbing her ankles. God, these things pinch worse every day, she muttered, tugging at the beige stockings she always wore, the elastic digging into her skin. You should just get new ones, I said, tearing the cinnamon roll in half. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. With what money, kiddo? We laughed a little at that, the kind of brittle laugh you make to push away the truth. That's when I noticed him. He was lying flat on his back across the pedestal in the center of the hollow. Everyone in town knew him. Folks called him Red, though no one knew his real name. His hair and beard were thick and rust-colored once, now gone gray with ash and dirt. He wandered Ashford's streets daily, muttering to himself, sometimes asking for cigarettes, sometimes yelling at shadows. People tolerated him mostly. He wasn't dangerous, just broken in ways no one tried to fix. That morning Red looked still, too still. One arm draped across his chest, the other hanging limp over the ledge of the pedestal. His coat was heavy and damp, though it hadn't rained all week. His mouth sagged half open. Has he moved since we got here? Mom asked, squinting. I don't think so, I said. He's probably just asleep. But I wasn't sure. Around us, shoppers moved quietly. Some teens loitered near the benches, stealing glances at the man. An old woman with a cane circled wide to avoid him, but nobody stepped forward. Nobody asked. Then came the birds. A lone crow landed on the pedestal, big, glossy, black. It tilted its head toward Red, eye glinting. Then another fluttered down, and another. I didn't think much at first. Ashford had crows everywhere, but these weren't just perching. They gathered, waiting, their heads cocked in eerie unison. Mom saw it too. Crows, she murmured. One for sorrow, two for joy. What? Old rhyme, she said absently. You know, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. I didn't answer. My stomach had gone tight. The first crow hopped closer, pecked at Red's cheek. I sat up straighter. Did you see that? Probably just after a crumb, Mom muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Another peck, harder this time. Red's head jerked slightly with the force. That's not right, Mom whispered. That's not right at all. More crows swooped in, wings beating the air. 5, then 7, then nearly a dozen. They crowded the pedestal, black feathers rippling. One darted forward and tore at the soft corner of Red's mouth. Something red and wet glistened. My breath hitched. Mom! Before she could answer, a shrill cry split the air. A woman screamed. The spell broke. People began shouting, stumbling back. The crows went mad. It was like they'd been waiting their whole lives. A black storm descended, wings slapping, claws scraping stone. They struck at Red's face, his hands, his throat. Bits of flesh pulled free with sickening wet sounds. His beard matted with blood. An eye vanished under the frenzy. He didn't move. Not once. Jesus Christ, a man gasped nearby, clapping a hand to his mouth. Another stumbled forward, then reeled back, retching into the steps. Up, now! Mom grabbed my wrist, pulling me. But I couldn't look away. My gaze locked on the horror in the hollow as more crows came wheeling down. 15, 20. The sound of their beaks striking bone filled the square like hammers. I whispered without meaning to. I think he's dead. Mom yanked me hard, dragging me up the steps. Behind us, the plaza rang with screams. Back then, hardly anyone had cell phones. Someone ran into the drugstore to call the police. Another dashed off looking for an officer. It took nearly 10 minutes for help to arrive. The first officer on scene couldn't have been more than 22. He took one look at the hollow, turned green, and vomited into a trash bin. Then he fumbled his radio. More officers came, then an ambulance. Finally, a coroner's van. They pulled a tarp over what was left of Red, but it was too late. Everyone had already seen. Rumors swirled in the weeks after. Some said Red died of a heart attack during the night, that he'd been lying there for hours before the crows descended. Others claimed he'd been alive when they started, paralyzed maybe, feeling every peck. No one knew. No one wanted to. The city power washed the hollow, painted over stains. For a while, flowers were left on the pedestal. Then vandals came, and the council removed everything. But people never sat there again. I left Ashford as soon as I turned 18. Got a job in Columbus, met a girl, built a life. Tried to forget, but the memory never left. Sometimes I'd hear wings beating outside my window at night and snap awake, heart pounding. Sometimes I'd see a crow on the sidewalk cocking its head, and my stomach would turn to ice. Because I remembered the sound of beaks on bone, the way we all watched and no one helped. Not because we didn't care, but because Red didn't matter, because he smelled, because he was a nobody. That's the real horror of it. Last year, almost 30 years later, I drove back through Ashford on a work trip. The hollow was still there, the pedestal long gone, just a flat patch of concrete now. And yet, perched along the rim of the dry fountain were 4 crows. They didn't move as I passed, didn't blink. One tilted its head and fixed me with a black, unflinching eye. And for the first time in decades, the thought struck me. What if Red wasn't dead when they started? What if the crows knew something we didn't? What if he felt every second of it? I'll never know. But I never set foot in the hollow again. Story 8. I was 11 years old when it happened. The year was 1998. My name's Daniel Price, and I grew up in a town called Brookhaven, tucked into the southern part of Indiana. If you've never heard of it, that makes sense. Nobody outside the county really had. It wasn't much more than a cluster of neighborhoods around a courthouse square, a couple of stoplights, a feed store, and a diner that doubled as both a breakfast spot and the local gossip hub. We had one grocery store, Miller's Market, family-owned, where the butcher knew everybody by name. There was a gas station that still used flip switches for the pumps, a library smaller than most people's living rooms, and a school that combined middle and high school into one brick building. It wasn't a bad place to grow up. Quiet, predictable. People waved at each other from porches. Everyone went to the Fall Festival and the 4th of July parade. On Saturdays, Little League took over the park. The kind of town where you could leave your bike in the yard and expect it to still be there the next morning. But everything changed the summer the Fletchers vanished. The Fletchers had moved in 2 years earlier, in '96, into the ranch-style house directly next door to us on Ashford Lane. There were 3 of them, Mark and Ellen, both in their 40s, and their teenage son, Jeremy, who was maybe 16 at the time. They also had a black lab named Shadow, who barked every time a car door slammed. Mark worked nights at a distribution warehouse over in Evansville. He was quiet, not unfriendly, just contained. The kind of guy who nodded hello but didn't linger. He smoked a lot. My dad used to joke he'd keep the Marlboro Company in business single-handed. Ellen was different. She was warm, talkative, always in the yard tending flowers or chatting with my mom over the fence. She had a laugh that carried, and she always kept a bowl of butterscotch candies on the counter. She'd give me one whenever I dropped off their mail by mistake. Jeremy was a little harder to read. Tall, skinny, always in hoodies even in the summer. He didn't play sports, didn't hang out with kids from school that I knew of. Mostly I'd see him skateboarding down the street at dusk or hear loud music thumping from his room. They weren't strange, just private. In a small town, being private was enough to make people talk. It was late August of 1998, just before school started. The air was thick and heavy, the way Indiana summers always were, and cicadas droned from the trees. I remember the last time I saw Ellen. She was in the yard wearing gardening gloves, kneeling in the dirt by her rose bushes. My mom called out, "You'll burn yourself up in this heat," and Ellen just laughed. "I'd rather melt than let these weeds win," she said, brushing hair from her face with the back of her wrist. That was a Tuesday. By Saturday, they were gone. It started with Shadow's barking. That dog barked at everything. Mailman, joggers, kids on bikes. But suddenly, one evening, the barking just stopped. At first, I didn't notice. But by the 3rd day, the silence sank in. I remember asking my mom, "Hey, did you hear Shadow lately?" She paused at the sink, drying her hands. "You know, now that you mention it, no, maybe they're on vacation." But they hadn't said a word about leaving. And in Brookhaven, people always mentioned if they were going out of town, mostly because they'd asked the neighbors to keep an eye out. By Monday morning, their car, a faded red Ford Taurus, was still parked in the driveway. Same spot. No movement. That evening, my mom went next door. I watched from our porch, heart thudding with some strange sense of dread. She knocked once, then again. Waited. Nothing. She came back unsettled. No lights, no sound, not even the dog. By Wednesday, she called the police. 2 officers came that afternoon. They walked the perimeter, knocked on doors and windows. I watched from the front steps, trying to look casual though my stomach felt twisted. Eventually, one officer forced the back door open. Minutes later, they came out holding Shadow. The poor dog looked half-starved, his ribs showing, fur matted. He lapped at the water they poured from a bottle like he hadn't seen a bowl in days. But there was no sign of the Fletchers. The house was locked from the inside. No note, no bags missing, clothes still in the drawers, wallets and purses on the counter. It was like they had just evaporated. In a small town, nothing spreads faster than silence. At Miller's Market, I overheard, maybe they left in the middle of the night. With their car sitting in the driveway? Maybe they had money troubles. Or worse, maybe Mark snapped. By Sunday, the whispers turned darker. Someone claimed they saw men in suits pulling boxes from the house late at night. Someone else swore Jeremy was mixed up with drugs. A few people even said the Fletchers weren't who they claimed at all. At 11, I didn't know what to believe, but I knew one thing. My world no longer felt safe. For the first time ever, my parents locked our doors at night. The Fletcher house sat empty. The lawn grew wild. Windows collected grime. Sometimes cops would come back with dogs or dig in the yard, but nothing came of it. Nobody moved in. Shadow was adopted by a family across town. Sometimes I'd see him at the park, older, slower, but still wagging his tail when kids petted him. It was almost worse, like proof the Fletchers had been real, but only the dog was left to prove it. When I hit high school, the story had turned into something between legend and cautionary tale. New kids whispered about it in the cafeteria. Seniors dared freshmen to sneak onto the porch at night. People swore they saw lights flicker inside, or shadows moving. But I knew better. The truth was scarier. Nothing ever happened. Just silence. In 2012, when I was 25, I got a call from my dad. His voice was tight. "They're digging next door." "What do you mean?" "Police. They've got dogs, big lights, whole yard roped off." By the time I drove down that weekend, the scene was taped off. Neighbors stood in clusters whispering. An officer told us it was part of an ongoing investigation. No details, but word got around. They said someone had come forward, a man who used to work with Mark. Said he'd known something for years but had been too afraid to tell. Rumor was they found bone fragments under the compost pile in the back corner of the yard. Nothing confirmed. No arrests, just whispers. My parents finally sold the house a few years later, downsizing to a condo in Bloomington. Before they moved, I stood on our old porch one last time, staring at the Fletcher house. The siding was peeling. The shutters sagged. Grass grew tall through the cracks in the driveway. But behind it, the patch of earth where they dug was smoother now, covered with new grass. I stared at it for a long time. For a moment, I thought I saw Shadow's tail wagging in the corner of my vision. But when I looked again, there was nothing. The truth is, I don't know what happened to the Fletchers. Maybe Mark killed them. Maybe someone else did. Maybe they were taken. What I do know is this. When people vanish in a place like Brookhaven, it doesn't just disappear with them. It hangs in the air, in the soil, in the silence. It follows you every time you pass a quiet house with shut blinds. Every time a dog stops barking too suddenly, and it never ever really goes away. Story 9. I was 14 the spring everything changed, and to this day I can tell you the exact smell of that season. The damp earth after rain, the faint smoke from someone burning brush piles, the sweetness of lilacs coming in too early. Ashford, Kansas wasn't the kind of place where big things happened. If anything, it was a town built to keep things small. Population was under 1,000 back then, maybe 900 and some. 2 diners, a single stoplight, 1 gas station with pumps that still had the metal flip numbers. We had a grocery store, sure, But if you wanted anything fancier than hamburger helper, you had to drive 40 miles to Wichita. Folks kept their doors unlocked, left their trucks idling while they ran into the post office. Safe, predictable. That was the point of Ashford. My parents had moved us there when I was 6, after my dad lost his job at a steel plant outside Kansas City. He said he wanted a slower life. My mom agreed, though she never looked fully comfortable with it. She liked malls, coffee shops, the noise of people. In Ashford, the biggest sound at night was crickets and the occasional semi rolling through on Highway 54. I was an only child, which made friends more important than anything. I had 2 solid ones, Daniel Price and Claire Winters. Daniel lived 3 houses down, wiry and tall for his age, with a mop of blonde hair he never bothered to comb. He was the joker, always looking for something to turn into a dare. Claire had moved to Ashford in 7th grade from Oklahoma. Dark hair, sharp tongue, the kind of girl who didn't back down from anyone, including teachers. The 3 of us stuck together. We had to. There wasn't much else to do. No arcade, no movie theater, not even cable at my place until I was 10. We'd wander fields, hike the edges of the river, sneak into the old grain elevator when we were feeling reckless. That spring, 1997, the river was high from snowmelt. The grasslands behind Daniel's house were starting to green, though the mornings were still cold enough that our breath fogged. April 12th, a Saturday. I'll never forget it. Daniel knocked on my window before 9, startling me awake. He never bothered with doors. "Come on," he whispered, grinning like a thief. "Let's go." I pushed the window up. "Where?" "Claire's already waiting, down by the path." "I found something yesterday I want to show you." I groaned, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my ratty backpack. Inside, I shoved a pocket knife, a bottle of water, and a deck of cards. We usually ended up sitting somewhere for hours. Claire was leaning against a fence post at the end of Birch Lane, arms crossed. She wore boots and a denim jacket too big for her. When she saw me, she smirked. "Sleeping Beauty lives," she said. "Shut up," I muttered, but I was smiling. We followed Daniel through the woods that skirted the south edge of town. The path was familiar. We'd walked it 100 times. But after 30 minutes, he veered off, cutting through thickets, ignoring our complaints. Finally, the trees opened into a clearing, and that's when I saw it. A car. At first, I thought it was just some old junker, the kind farmers left to rot. But as we stepped closer, it didn't look right. The paint was a dull green, sun-faded, with fake wood paneling curling at the edges. Vines clung to the mirrors. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. It was a station wagon, maybe late 70s. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, with no tracks leading to it. "Holy crap," Claire muttered. "How did it even get here?" Daniel grinned. "Told you it was weird?" I circled it slowly, heart thumping. "This doesn't make sense. There's no road." Daniel tugged at the back door handle. It creaked, then popped open with a groan that made my skin crawl. Inside smelled of dust, mildew, and something faintly sour. The upholstery was torn. Old fast food wrappers crumpled on the floor. A pair of fuzzy dice still dangled from the mirror, swaying gently in the draft. "Let's go inside," Daniel said like it was the most natural thing. "Are you insane?" I asked. But Claire was already sliding into the driver's seat, running her fingers over the cracked wheel. "Better than sitting in the grass. Come on." Daniel dove into the back. With a sinking feeling, I took the passenger seat. For the next hour, we joked, made up stories about who had owned it. Daniel claimed it was a getaway car from a bank robbery. Claire said it was a makeout spot that someone forgot. I tried to laugh, but unease crawled in my stomach. When the sun dipped and our stomachs growled, we left. Claire paused before stepping into the grass. "No one else needs to know," she said firmly. "This can be our spot." Daniel agreed instantly. I nodded, though something in me wanted to tell my dad right then. The next day it rained, hard, but Daniel still showed up. Claire too. So we went. The storm pounded the car roof as we ducked inside, laughing, dripping water everywhere. I took the back seat this time, stretching my legs. That's when my foot nudged something soft under the bench. I bent down, brushing aside wrappers. My hand froze. A clump of brown hair tangled. Too fine to be animal. Daniel, I whispered. What? He leaned forward. There's hair under here. He frowned. Claire turned, eyes narrowing. I pushed farther, noticed a slit in the seat fabric, like someone had cut it open and stitched it back poorly. My heart raced. I yanked my hand back. We need to get out. Now! Daniel laughed nervously. Quit screwing around. I'm serious, I snapped. Let's go. Claire studied my face, then nodded. Out. We stood in the rain, shivering. I explained what I saw. Their expressions changed instantly. That's messed up, Daniel muttered. No kidding, Claire said. Her tough exterior cracked just a little. We walked back in silence, rain soaking us. At home, I told my dad. Not everything. I left out that we'd found it yesterday, but enough. He listened, jaw tight, then said, I'll call Sheriff Donnelly. Better safe than sorry. That night, while we were playing cards in Daniel's basement, the sheriff himself showed up. His face was grave. They found it, he said simply, and a body. The world tilted. My stomach dropped. Claire sat down hard on the floor. Daniel didn't speak. The sheriff continued. We'll need you kids at the station tomorrow, just to clarify details. My parents came to get me. That night, I couldn't sleep. For weeks, Ashford buzzed with rumors. People avoided the woods. Kids weren't allowed out past dusk. Eventually, we learned more. The car had been registered to a man from Colorado, reported missing in 1994. His remains were under the back seat. Blunt force trauma. His wallet buried beneath the driver's seat. No fingerprints. No DNA. No weapon. The case went cold. Claire moved the next year. Her dad took a job in Texas. Daniel stayed, works construction now. We talk sometimes. And every time the conversation circles back to that car, to the body waiting there in the grass for years, and to the question that still keeps me awake. Who left it there? And how many times did we pass them on Main Street, smile politely, never knowing?